Welcome back to episode 2 of my Precision Health channel. My name is Mirthe and I'm a functional medicine practitioner. Go back to my previous episode if you missed that, where I introduced me and my work and my approach to precision health optimization. Now, in today's podcast, I would like to talk about intermittent fasting and its many health benefits, but also its potential pitfalls if it's overdone or not done in the right way. Now, a lot of you might already be doing some intermittent fasting because it's become kind of trendy, and there's a good reason for it because it has lots of great health benefits. So let's dive right in there and talk about what intermittent fasting can do for you if you're doing it the right way. Now, research shows that intermittent fasting helps with insulin sensitivity, which is the opposite to insulin resistance, which can contribute to inflammation, can contribute to Alzheimer's, cancers, cardiovascular disease, a bad metabolism, accumulation of that layer of belly fat around the waistline. Now, if the opposite is happening, increasing insulin sensitivity, then that is a good thing, obviously. Intermittent fasting has also been shown to help balance hormones. It helps to upregulate estrogen receptors and downregulate our androgen testosterone receptors. Now, if there's an imbalance, which is often the case in people with, let's say, PCOS or acne, when they have too much of testosterone but not enough estrogen, that can sometimes be the case, then intermittent fasting can help balance this out. And it also has been shown to help with fertility for that same reason, because having PCOS can lower fertility, but also intermittent fasting can help ovarian health. It can help recycle and make egg health stronger. So it has lots of good benefits on that side as well. Intermittent fasting has also been shown to extend the time until we hit menopause. So another good factor. So you have less of a risk of going into an early menopause if you practice some intermittent fasting. Also, and those are probably the factors that are most often talked about, it has great benefits for anti-aging. Because it does something called, or supports something called autophagy, which is cellular recycling. Now, we all have lots of cells constantly dividing, renewing, but also some cells in our body becoming old, mutated, sick. That happens all the time, every split second. Now, we depend on our body to be able to recycle them, and also something called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, to signal to whichever cells are not optimal to get rid of them so they can go out of the body. There's also something called senescent cells, which is when cells are just kind of zombie cells and they're just not dying. We don't want that. We want old, mutated, worn out cells to die, be recycled, be taken out, and then fresh cells can come in, new ones, energetic ones. Another thing that intermittent fasting does, it upregulates our sirtuins, which are it's like a component in the body that is really important for lots of protective anti-aging processes. And the way it does that is that intermittent fasting upregulates NAD plus levels in our body, and that then it upregulates sirtuins. A lot of you might have heard of these. That's why I'm throwing in these slightly fancier words. You can also think of intermittent fasting like a break where the body has time to regenerate, reset. You can think of it like when you have the house full of people, you can't really clean up and tidy. You need to make sure that you get everyone out of the house so that you can do a proper cleanup, tidy up, a deep clean. Now, the same thing happens with the body. If we're constantly eating, our body can't really do its cleaning up after itself. Another thing that intermittent fasting does is it helps to reset our gut microbiome. Now, a lot of you know by now that we have good bacteria and bad bacteria in our gut. And it's all about a good balance in there. And we want some bacteria in there because they help us break down nutrients, create nutrients, certain vitamins. But if the bad guys take over and we don't have enough of the good ones, and we can have lots of problems, including increased inflammation, increased cellular damage, increased risk of food allergies and intolerances. So we want to make sure that we keep everything healthy in our gut and a good, healthy gut microbiome. Now, research shows that if we do intermittent fasting, it helps actually get rid of the bad guys and increases the amount of good ones in our gut. So that's good as well. Also, sometimes people have digestive issues and they're just constantly snacking and the gut just never gets a break to clean out. There's something called migrating motor complex, which helps to clean everything out, push everything through. That can only really happen properly when we're in a fasted state. So if we're constantly snacking, people tend to have more issues with digestive problems. Now, those are all great health benefits of intermittent fasting, and you might want to give it a try. But I want to just give a word of caution that you don't want to overdo it, because overdoing intermittent fasting has been shown to have some potential pitfalls and bad effects. So as much as intermittent fasting can help with hormone balance, overdoing it can actually do the opposite. Now, if we overdo intermittent fasting, it upregulates something called CYP17A1, which is an enzyme that increases our estrogen levels. Now, if we do that too much, then we might become estrogen dominant, which is not a good thing because it contributes to things like PMS, endometriosis, fibroids, cysts, potentially even breast cancer. So we don't want that. Where intermittent fasting helps protect towards cancer, overdoing it can do the opposite. Now, it also, if we overdo it, it can downregulate our progesterone and our thyroid hormones, which can lower fertility levels. So again, it then does the opposite to what we aimed to do. Overdoing intermittent fasting can also mess with our circadian rhythm, which is how our body reacts to the daily rhythm. Waking up in the morning, we want to have a really nice spike of cortisol, so we are energized, we get up and going. And then later in the day, we want cortisol to come down so that we can go into the more rest, digest, and heal mode and have a good restorative night of sleep. Now, research out of Tübingen University in Germany showed that women, after 24 hours of fasting, their stress response was still fine, everything went well. More than 24 hours fasting, their cortisol all of a sudden started to not spike in the morning anymore when we wanted to spike, but then stay too high late in the day when we wanted to drop. So that is not a good thing for us. And then what they also showed is that after 48 hours of fasting, something else happened, which is the heart rate variability, also called HRV, started to drop. And HRV is a sign of our cellular resilience, our heart health, how well we can deal with stressors. It's got much to do with our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, whether we're running away from a tiger or whether we're resting, digesting, and healing. Now, overdoing fasting had a bad effect on our cortisol levels, but also on that heart rate variability. So again, something we don't want. Overdoing intermittent fasting can also mess with our circadian rhythm, like I said before. And there's other reasons why that's bad, because we want to have a nice spike of cortisol in the morning, then we want it to taper off in the afternoon so that we can get a good night's sleep, so that our body can rest, heal, get rid of mutated cells, and then that whole cycle continues. Now, research shows that if we're fasting too late in the day and we're waiting with our first meal until, let's say, afternoon, then that meal has a completely different effect on our metabolism and our health markers than if we were to have that same meal early on in the day. So research now suggests that there's something called time restricted eating, and earlier is better than later. So I see it quite a lot in patients and also friends. They say, yes, I started intermittent fasting and I'm not eating all day until evening, and then I have a big meal and that's great. They usually see good benefits initially, but eventually the body usually gives up, because what research suggests now is that if we wait until much past noon with our first meal, especially if it's as late as 4 p.m., then the same calories have a completely different effect on the body. The same quality of food has a completely different effect on the body. So our cortisol will be messed up. We talked about that before, but also our cholesterol, also our blood sugar. So if we wait until too late in the day, we will actually have a higher blood sugar throughout the day, making our cells more insulin resistant, which I talked about before. Intermittent fasting helps with insulin sensitivity. But if we wait too long and we fast too much, then it does the opposite. Again, not a good thing. Also, it will increase our next morning, our fasting sugar glucose in the blood is increased if we have waited for too long the day before with our first meal. A few other parts to how to consider how to eat, when to eat, and if you want to include intermittent fasting. Number one rule is to try and eat earlier in the day and have your fasting throughout the night. So research isn't 100% conclusive on when exactly is best to eat, but it seems like any time mid-morning would be ideal to start eating and then finish in the early evening, late afternoon. Now, that doesn't really fit with a lot of people's schedules. I'm aware of that. So it seems like it might also be okay to have your first meal at lunchtime and then finish with an early dinner, but no later than that. So you don't want to start waiting with your meal until 4 p.m. That has bad effects. Research also suggests that you need to make sure that those meals you have enough protein with your meals so that your body doesn't start to break down, degrade, thinks it's starving all the time. So you need to make sure that you have a good portion of protein if you're having 2 meals, make sure you really spread out your protein on those 2 meals. If you're having 3 portions in that shorter eating window, then make sure that you split it up, but you have enough protein, because it will stabilize your blood sugar and it will have much better outcomes. So research also shows that if your first meal of the day is higher in protein, and even if you've extended it to a little bit later in the day, let's say until noon, then your blood sugar response after will be better than if you've waited too late and then you're eating a meal really low in protein and lots of sugars and carbs, and then your body will respond to it very differently. Another thing to consider is that oftentimes when people start intermittent fasting, they might just not be getting enough nutrients. And then what they found is that we get all these benefits from not having not that many calories, which is great. But then over time, we might just not give our body enough of the right building blocks, including the protein that I was talking about before. But in particular, if we keep doing this and we're just starving our body and we're not getting enough building blocks, in particular protein, then our muscles might start to lose mass. And for aging, it's actually not very good to lose muscle mass because we become more frail, our bones become more brittle. So we want to make sure that if we include intermittent fasting for all of its amazing health benefits, we want to make sure we do it at the right time of the day. The earlier, the better, and that we have enough protein and good nutritious food in there so that we're not starving our body of all the right nutrients. So I want you to take away from this that intermittent fasting is a really great strategy to add to your health optimization, prevention, and anti-aging toolbox, but you want to make sure that you do it within reason. You don't overdo it. You don't want to wait all day, starve yourself all day, and then have a big meal in the evening because it messes with your sleep and all these other things. So start earlier in the day with your circadian rhythm. Eat when it's light, stop eating when it's dark, and make sure that you get all the right nutrient blocks so that you can thrive and stay healthy for the long term. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Comment below so that I know what you like, if you want me to dive into certain things in more detail, and I look forward to the next one.